Hi everyone! Today we're going to be looking at NVIDIA's new technology, NVIDIA Reflex, and how it could improve your experience in Valorant by lowering your system latency. I'm sure many of you have wondered why some professional gamers choose to use lower resolutions when they play. This is because they prefer to sacrifice graphics for performance and responsiveness, because even a few milliseconds when the computer is busy rendering could make a difference in whether they win or lose a game. Assuming the game developers implemented a low latency mode using the NVIDIA Reflex software development kit, turning on NVIDIA Reflex means that we don't have to sacrifice graphics for performance, as it works to reduce latency even at higher resolutions. System latency is how quickly or slowly your display updates after you click your mouse or keyboard. There are many factors that contribute to the amount of time taken. The shorter the time taken, the lower the latency, and the better the performance and responsiveness. Peripheral latency is the time it takes your input device, like your mouse or keyboard, to process your mechanical input and send those input events to the PC. Game latency is the time it takes for the CPU to process input or changes to the world and submit a new frame to the GPU to be rendered. Render latency is the time from when the frame gets in line to be rendered to when the GPU completely renders the frame. PC latency is the time it takes a frame to travel through the PC. This includes both game and render latency. Display latency is the time it takes for the display to present a new image after the GPU has finished rendering the frame. System latency is the time encompassing the whole end-to-end measurement, from the start of peripheral latency to the end of display latency. Frames per second has been the traditional way that we measure system performance. However, this is a measure of throughput, not responsiveness. To improve responsiveness, we need to look at system latency, which was almost impossible to measure previously. NVIDIA Reflex is a low-latency esports technology that allows us to now measure and reduce system latency. NVIDIA Reflex helps with the game and render latency by reducing the render queue by keeping the CPU in sync with the GPU. This also reduces back pressure on the CPU, enabling games to sample mouse and keyboard input at the last possible moment, further reducing system latency. Within the NVIDIA control panel, you can activate NVIDIA Ultra Low Latency mode to minimize latency quickly and easily. Press Alternate and Z to bring up the performance overlay and select Advanced or Latency. Press Alternate R to toggle the overlay on or off. Press Alternate Z to bring up your performance overlay. Ensure that you can see CPU utilization, GPU utilization, and render latency. Play a game and check the figures of your GPU and CPU utilization. If either your GPU or CPU utilization exceeds 98%, you're likely bound in that spec. In general, competitive first-person shooter titles like Valorant and Fortnite are dynamic in terms of CPU and GPU usage. So you will likely see the numbers reflecting changes between GPU and CPU boundedness. If there is an explosion with lots of particles and the game becomes GPU bound, the Reflex SDK will keep the latency low by not letting the work for the GPU queue up. If the rendering is simple and the game is CPU bound, the Reflex SDK will keep latency low by maintaining high GPU clock frequencies. Regardless of the state of the rendering pipeline, the Reflex SDK intelligently reduces render latency for the given configuration. With the Reflex SDK, gamers can stay in the rendering latency sweet spot without having to turn all their settings to low.